So you wanted to take a deep dive into David Deida's The Way of the Superior Man, huh?
Oh yeah, it's a book that that really gets people talking about masculinity.
Especially in today's world, right? It feels super relevant.
Absolutely, and we're going to try to break it down for you.
Distill those key takeaways.
Give you some things to think about, maybe even some action steps. So, jumping right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
One of the things that Deida really challenges us to think about is how we define a man's worth.
Because it's not all about, that typical success, right? Money, achievements, all that.
He says those things they're important, but
There's got to be something deeper.
there's this deeper level, this presence
Yeah.
that he says is really where a man's true value comes from.
So it's about being present, aware.
Yeah, he even contrasts it, like a steady gaze versus, shifty eyes, full breathing compared to shallow gasps. It's about like a groundedness, even when things are tough.
I can see how that's valuable, but for the listener, how does that actually play out in their everyday life? Like, what's the advantage?
Well, think about it. When you're present, you're more connected, right? Not just to yourself, but to everything around you. That leads to better decisions,
Deeper connections with people?
a stronger sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It's like you radiate this inner strength and it draws people in.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's almost like showing up differently in the world.
Exactly. And building on that masculine energy, Deida goes into this whole concept of masculine and feminine essences.
Okay, so he's saying that most people have a dominant energy, either more masculine or feminine, and that kind of drives how they approach life.
Yes. And it shapes their desires.
Yeah.
He uses these great examples like, think of a football player laser focused on reaching the end zone,
That drive, that mission, that's that masculine energy.
Right. And then for the feminine, he uses the image of like a romantic movie heroine.
Yearning for love, connection.
Exactly. That longing for deep connection. But, he does say that not everybody fits neatly into these categories.
There are those who are more balanced.
Absolutely. The balanced type. But for those who do resonate with it, it can be really powerful.
It's a framework for understanding yourself and your relationships better.
Exactly. And this all ties into how these roles are evolving in society.
Yeah.
We've gone from those traditional roles,
So this big push for 50-50, equality.
and there are great things about that, right?
Yeah, men embracing their feminine side.
Women tapping into their masculine energy.
It's changed workplaces, families, the whole dynamic.
And this is where Deida gets interesting. He says this blurring of roles in our everyday lives, it doesn't always work so well in our intimate relationships.
So we might want equality in the boardroom, but in our romantic partnerships, there's still this yearning for something different.
That push and pull.
That polarity.
He believes a certain degree of that difference, that tension between masculine and feminine energies is crucial for keeping the passion alive.
So, have you noticed this shift in your own relationships? Think about how these changing roles have impacted things, maybe for better or for worse. Definitely something to ponder.
Deida puts so much emphasis on living in alignment with your purpose. He goes as far as to say everything else is superficial without it.
Without that core, that's a strong statement.
It is, and it really gets to the heart of his message. He suggests that a lot of us are living based on what society expects, not what we truly desire.
We get caught up in the daily grind and lose sight of what really matters. So how do we even uncover that purpose, that thing that lights us up?
Well, you got to ask yourself some tough questions like, what truly excites you? What would you do even if you weren't getting paid for it?
What unique gifts can you bring to the world?
It's like peeling back those layers, getting to the core of who you are.
And once you find it, you've got to nurture it. Deida talks about disciplining your life to support your purpose, minimizing distractions, building routines that work for you.
Exactly. Creating a life that reflects your deepest values.
And that can get tricky when you factor in things like family responsibilities.
Oh, absolutely. Many people struggle with balancing their passions with their commitments to others.
And Deida doesn't sugarcoat it. He straight up says that using family as an excuse to compromise on your purpose, it can actually weaken your core and negatively impact your relationships.
He suggests a better way is to be fully present, fully engaged when you're with loved ones, even if it's for shorter periods.
Quality over quantity.
Yes. You can't truly give to others if you're not taking care of yourself and pursuing what makes you feel alive.
And how do you balance that in your own life?
Honestly, it's a constant work in progress, but Deida's words are a good reminder
To prioritize both personal growth and our commitments.
to find that balance.
Now, Deida also stresses the importance of facing challenges head on. He doesn't pretend that life is easy.
He uses this metaphor of getting stamped on by the steer.
Oh, wow, that's vivid.
He's talking about those inevitable tough
The
experiences.
things that, knock us down.
But he argues those challenges are crucial for our development.
It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right. He wants us to see obstacles as opportunities,
To grow and evolve.
to become more resilient. And he ties this back to relationships, too.
So it's not just about weathering storms in life, it's about navigating the ups and downs of intimacy as well.
Instead of avoiding conflict, use it to grow, to deepen the connection. He has this phrase, conquer the world and your woman with love.
Pretty powerful stuff. And this leads to another area where Deida offers some unique insights. Communication, especially between men and women.
He points out that women often communicate indirectly.
So it's not always about what they're actually saying. There's a deeper message.
Yes. They're often revealing truths about the relationship, not just surface desires.
He uses that example of a woman asking her partner to plan a special birthday surprise instead of just telling him what she wants.
It's not about the gift itself. She's looking for him to show he understands her.
Her needs, her desires on a deeper level.
Exactly. He calls this the feminine oracle. Like women communicate in a way that reveals the underlying energy of the relationship.
That makes you think, how many times have we missed a deeper message because we were too focused on the literal words being said? So for you listening, think about a recent misunderstanding. Could there have been a deeper meaning you overlooked?
Definitely worth considering. Now let's talk about sexual polarity. Deida highlights this dynamic tension between masculine and feminine energies.
And how it fuels attraction.
Exactly. And he expresses concern that, this modern emphasis on sameness might actually lead to less passionate relationships.
It's like two sides of a magnet, right?
Yeah.
Opposites attract. But if you neutralize the poles,
You lose that spark.
no more attraction.
Exactly. And then he introduces this really intriguing analogy, temperature.
Okay, tell me more about this temperature thing. I'm intrigued.
So, he says that different women possess varying energetic temperatures, and these can either heal or irritate a man, depending on what he needs. Think of it like this. Some women have a calming energy that helps you feel grounded.
And others have a more fiery energy that can ignite a spark.
Yes. And Daida's point is, a man needs to be aware of what he needs energetically and seek out a partner whose energy complements his own.
It's not just about surface level attraction. It's about finding someone who helps you feel more alive.
Exactly. More yourself.
All right, let's get into one of Deida's his more controversial ideas, the dark masculine. He says that deep down, women actually desire the killer in their man.
Now, hold on. Before anyone freaks out.
We're not talking about actual violence here.
No, not at all. This is Deida using a metaphor.
It's about a primal strength, the willingness to face your fears and act decisively.
He uses everyday examples like finding a cockroach in your living room.
Or hearing strange noises at night.
A woman wants to know her man can handle these situations without panicking.
That he can protect, he can provide, even when things get tough.
Exactly. So this killer instinct, it's about courage, responsibility, being willing to sacrifice comfort for something greater.
So it's a call for men to step into their power, to be fearless. Where in your own life do you see men holding back from this?
I think a lot of men have been conditioned to suppress their primal energy, to be nice and avoid conflict.
And Deida would say that's not doing anyone any favors.
He says that a man who denies that part of himself becomes, less vital, less attractive, less capable of fully showing up.
So it's about finding a healthy way to express that primal energy, to channel it into something positive.
Precisely. And then moving on to physical presence, Deida emphasizes open body posture, deep breathing, direct eye contact. He even suggests exercises to open up the body and enhance energy flow.
It's about embodying that confident, grounded masculinity we were talking about before.
Exactly, and he believes this translates to everything.
How you interact with the world, how you connect with your partner.
He even says the same principles apply to penetrating the world and penetrating your woman. Both require fearlessness and full presence.
Okay, let's not get too graphic.
But you get the idea. It's about being fully engaged physically and mentally. And something we can all do no matter what. Practice deep belly breathing throughout the day. Helps to counteract tension and increase presence.
It's so simple, yet it can be really powerful.
Right. And on that note, Deida also talks about the importance of both solitude and male community.
So it's about finding that balance between being alone and connecting with others.
Yes, men need time alone to recharge, to reflect, to reconnect with their purpose. He compares it to like going into the wilderness to rediscover yourself.
And he contrasts that with how women rejuvenate, often through connecting with other women, sharing, celebrating their femininity.
Exactly. So the takeaway is make space for both in your life, for yourself and for your partner.
So for our listeners out there, how do you balance that need for solitude with your desire for connection? Because it is something we all struggle with. And let's get into another, maybe a slightly controversial topic. Deida's perspective on ejaculation. He seems to see it as almost a distraction from deeper intimacy.
He suggests that men can get so focused on the goal of ejaculation that they miss out on the experience.
The shared intimacy.
Exactly. He even talks about converting that orgasmic energy into something that deepens connection, not just seeking a quick release.
He wants men to unlearn those more masturbatory habits.
To focus on relaxing the body, prolonging the experience, creating a more fulfilling connection.
It's about shifting the focus from the physical act to the energetic exchange between partners.
That's a pretty radical perspective.
Yeah.
He's challenging us to rethink our approach to sex and intimacy.
Big time. So he asks the listener, is your sexual energy serving you and your partner in the best way possible? Something to think about. Well, that was a lot to take in.
It was, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so much more to unpack here, but we'll have to save that for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for part 2. You know, one of the things that really struck me was Deida's idea that a man's past behavior can become almost meaningless in a relationship.
Wait, really? I thought building a solid track record, being consistent, that was important.
That's what's so interesting about Deida's perspective. He's saying it might matter to you, but it doesn't necessarily hold the same weight for your partner.
Especially if you're not living up to your purpose right now in this moment.
Exactly. It's like all those good deeds, they kind of get wiped away if you mess up in the present. He uses some pretty strong language to make his point.
Yeah, like what?
He says a man could be perfect for like 10 years, but if he acts poorly even for a short time, his partner will act like he's always been that way. But, it's not like Deida's condoning bad behavior.
It's more about highlighting how a woman experiences the relationship, right?
Right. She's attuned to the energy of the present moment, and that's what shapes her experience. So past actions, they don't have the same power.
So it's not about keeping score, it's about shifting the energy back to a good place.
Exactly. If you mess up, acknowledge it, take responsibility, maybe surprise her with some love or affection, shift that energy.
It sounds like emotional intelligence is key here. Being aware of your own emotions and hers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Deida does talk about that, how men and women experience pleasure and release tension differently.
Okay, how so?
He says men often seek freedom through release, while women seek love through surrender.
Interesting. So it's not the same experience for both partners.
He uses the example of a man snoring after sex.
Wholly relaxed.
He's achieved that release.
But the woman might feel disconnected because she hasn't experienced that same level of surrender and connection.
So we need to be in tune with our partner's needs, not just focused on our own.
Exactly. Deida's encouraging men to create that shared experience of love and connection.
Which brings us to another concept Deida talks about, the dark feminine.
Ah, yes, this is where it gets really interesting. And again, he's not saying women are like inherently dark.
He's talking about a primal energy that exists within every woman.
So it can be alluring.
But also intimidating.
Yeah.
And men need to be able to meet that energy, not with force.
Not trying to control it.
But with consciousness.
How you approach a wild animal.
Respect its power.
Yes. He uses that analogy. You wouldn't try to tame a tiger by yelling at it or putting it in a cage.
You have to meet its power with your own.
And for Deida, a man's willingness to face and embrace this dark feminine, it's a sign of his spiritual maturity.
So it's about leaning into those challenges, not shying away.
And this ties back into the killer instinct. That ability to face fear is also essential for relating to the dark feminine.
Being that steady presence she can rely on.
Exactly.
Speaking of presence, Deida is all about cultivating a strong physical presence. Right?
Oh, yeah. He emphasizes open posture, deep breathing, direct eye contact. He even has specific exercises for this to release tension and help men stand more confidently in the world.
Embodying that grounded masculinity. And he believes this presence impacts everything, your career, your relationships.
And then there's the balance between solitude and connection.
Right. Men need both. Solitude to recharge, to connect with their purpose, but also those strong bonds with other men forged through shared experiences.
It's interesting how he contrasts that with how women often recharge through connection, sharing, celebrating their femininity with other women.
It's a different kind of energy.
So make space for both, guys, for
Right.
yourselves and your partners.
Now, this next concept might seem a little out there. Being willing to die for your woman.
Whoa, okay. Again, not literally, right?
No, it's a metaphor,
Yeah.
but a powerful one. Deida is talking about the ultimate surrender of the ego, the willingness to put your partner's needs above your own,
Even when it's hard.
even when it's really hard, recognizing that the relationship is bigger than your individual desires.
That true love requires sacrifice.
It can be tough to wrap your head around, but Deida believes it's the key to profound intimacy.
So shifting gears a bit, Deida also talks a lot about the importance of purpose, right?
He believes it's crucial. Without it, a man will drift, feel lost, unfulfilled. He wants men to identify their passions, their talents, the impact they want to make.
Figure out what legacy they want to leave behind.
It's about aligning your actions with your values and making choices that create a meaningful life.
So no more drifting. Time to step up and live with purpose.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on emotional intelligence again. Deida stresses this so much.
It's crucial for navigating relationships and just showing up authentically in the world.
He knows men are often told to suppress their emotions, to be strong and silent, but he believes this can be so damaging.
It creates disconnection, leads to problems.
So what's the alternative? Well, Deida encourages men to actually feel their emotions, all of them, without judgment.
So create that space to process them, whether it's through journaling, meditation, talking to someone you trust.
That's about developing that awareness and learning to express your emotions in a healthy way.
Which brings us to another area where Deida offers some interesting perspectives. Sexuality.
He sees sexuality as this sacred, powerful force that can be used for pleasure, for connection, and for spiritual growth.
It's about more than just the physical act, right?
Way more. He cautions against just seeing sex as a way to release tension. He wants men to view it as a form of meditation, a pathway to deeper intimacy, a source of joy and fulfillment. He even talks about specific practices, like tantric techniques.
So it's about being present, mindful, intentional.
Exactly. Bringing that same presence we talked about earlier into the bedroom.
And then there's the importance of setting boundaries, which, let's be honest, is something a lot of men struggle with.
Oh, big time. We tend to overextend ourselves, try to please everyone.
And Deida says that's a recipe for burnout.
You can't pour from an empty cup, so know your limits. Be willing to say no. Prioritize your well-being.
It's not selfish, it's essential.
Now get ready for this one. Deida introduces this idea of being polarizing.
Okay, explain that one.
He says that a man who's truly living his purpose, being his authentic self, he's going to polarize people.
So some people will love him.
And others will, well, not so much.
You can't please everyone.
Exactly. And Deida says, embrace it. Don't shy away from your power. Trying to please everyone just leads to a watered-down version of yourself.
So own your uniqueness, shine your light, and the right people will be drawn to you.
That's the idea. Now, one last thing before we move on. Deida talks about cultivating inner peace.
Not in the sense of withdrawing from the world, right?
No. He sees it as a state of being calm and centered, even when things are chaotic.
Like a deep inner stillness.
And he suggests practices like meditation, yoga, being in nature to cultivate that inner peace.
Makes sense. Now, how about the balance between independence and interdependence? That's a tricky one in relationships.
It is. Deida believes both are important for men and for women. You need your own sense of self, but you also need that deep connection with your partner.
It's about finding that sweet spot, right?
Exactly. Don't be too clingy, but also be present and supportive. Find that balance between spending quality time together and giving each other space to grow.
All right, last concept for this part. Embracing your shadow side. This one always intrigues me.
Oh yeah, this is deep stuff. It's about those parts of ourselves we try to hide, the negative traits we don't like to acknowledge.
Our anger, jealousy, insecurities, fears, all that.
Deida believes every man has a shadow side. And instead of denying it, he says, face it. Integrate it into your sense of self.
So it's about acknowledging those darker parts of ourselves.
And finding healthy ways to work with them.
Not letting them control us, but also not pretending they don't exist.
Exactly. Deida actually sees the shadow side as a source of power and creativity. Explore it, understand it, and you become a more whole person.
Okay, makes sense. Now, what about purpose? Deida talks about that a lot.
Living a life of purpose is so central to his message. He sees it as the key to feeling truly alive, fulfilled.
He urges men to ask those big questions. What excites me? What do I want to contribute? What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind?
It's about making choices that align with your values, that move you towards a life of meaning.
No more settling for a life that feels empty.
Exactly. Now, one final topic before we move on to the last part of our deep dive: emotional intelligence. I know we touched on this earlier, but it's so important, I think it's worth revisiting.
It's really the foundation for everything else, isn't it?
It is. Deida knows that men are often taught to suppress their emotions, but he believes this creates so many problems in relationships.
Because we end up disconnected from ourselves and from our partners.
Exactly. So instead of suppressing, he encourages men to lean in, to feel their emotions fully.
Without judgment.
Create space to process those emotions, whether it's through journaling, meditation, talking to a therapist. Find what works for you.
It's about becoming more emotionally aware and finding healthy ways to express those emotions.
That's the key. And that brings us to sexuality. This is another area where Deida's insights can be really valuable.
What's his take on it?
He sees sexuality as this sacred, powerful force. It's not just about physical pleasure. It's about connection, intimacy, and even spiritual growth.
He's definitely encouraging a more mindful and intentional approach.
Absolutely. He cautions against viewing sex as just a means to an end or as a way to release tension. He wants men to approach it with reverence, with awareness, with a desire to connect deeply with their partner. He even suggests practicing specific techniques, like tantric practices, to help cultivate and direct sexual energy.
Wow. It's a whole different way of thinking about sex.
It is. Now let's shift gears and talk about setting boundaries, something a lot of men struggle with.
I know, I do. It's easy to overextend ourselves to try and please everyone.
And Deida would say, stop doing that. It's not serving you, and it's not serving the people you care about.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. So know your limits, be willing to say no, and prioritize your well-being. It's not selfish, it's essential.
Makes sense. Okay, hit me with another Deida-ism.
All right, how about this one? Being polarizing.
Polarizing. I'm not sure I like the sound of that.
Well, hear me out. Deida believes that a man who's truly living his purpose, being his authentic self, will inevitably polarize people.
Meaning?
Meaning some people will be drawn to him, they'll love his energy.
And others will be turned off.
Exactly. And Deida says that's okay. It's actually a good thing. Trying to please everyone dilutes your power, your essence. Embrace the fact that not everyone will like you, and that's fine.
Own your uniqueness. That's a powerful message.
Yeah, it is. Now, one last thing before we move on. Deida talks a lot about cultivating inner peace. And he's not talking about withdrawing from the world or becoming passive.
So what does he mean?
He sees inner peace as a state of equanimity, an ability to remain calm and centered even when everything around you is chaotic.
Like a deep inner stillness.
Exactly. And there are lots of ways to cultivate that. Meditation, yoga, spending time in nature. Experiment and find what works for you.
Finding that inner peace can make a huge difference in how we navigate the world, especially relationships.
Absolutely. Now, how about that balance between independence and interdependence? That's always a tricky one in relationships.
It is. We all crave both, right? We want to feel connected, but we also want to maintain our sense of self.
And Deida believes we need both, men and women alike.
So what's the key to finding that balance?
It's about not being too clingy, but also being present and supportive, spending quality time together, but also giving each other space to grow and evolve. It's a dance, really.
And it takes practice.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, one last concept for this part. Embracing your shadow side.
Ooh, I like this one. It's deep. It's about facing those parts of ourselves we tend to hide, the parts we're not so proud of.
Exactly. Those negative traits, the anger, the jealousy, the insecurities.
All the stuff we try to bury.
Deida says don't bury it. Face it. Integrate it into your sense of self. He believes that every man has a shadow side, and it's actually a source of power and creativity when we learn to work with it.
So it's about becoming a more whole person, accepting all parts of ourselves, both the light and the dark.
Exactly. And this ties back into that idea of living with purpose. When you embrace your shadow side, you tap into a deeper level of authenticity, which fuels your purpose.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all connects. So back to purpose. What are some of Deida's key points about that?
He's really adamant that men need to live a life of purpose. He sees it as the antidote to feeling lost, unfulfilled, like you're just drifting through life. He encourages men to ask those big questions. What excites me? What do I want to contribute to the world? What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind?
It's about getting clear on your values and making choices that move you towards a life of meaning.
Exactly. No more settling for a life that feels empty.
And this all circles back to emotional intelligence, right? Deida talks about that a lot.
He does. And it's so important. I think it's worth emphasizing. He knows that men are often conditioned to suppress their emotions, to be stoic and strong. But he believes that this can be really detrimental to our well-being and our relationships.
We end up disconnected from ourselves and from the people we care about.
Exactly. So what's the alternative? Well, Deida encourages men to actually feel their emotions, all of them, without judgment.
Create space to process those emotions, whether it's through journaling, meditation, talking to someone you trust. Find what works for you.
Exactly. It's about developing emotional awareness and finding healthy ways to express those emotions. It's a journey, but it's worth it.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the way of the superior man. We've covered a lot, but there's still more to unpack, right?
Definitely. There are some nuances to Deida's teachings that we need to explore.
Like that idea about a man's past behavior becoming meaningless in a relationship. That one really stuck with me.
It's a tough one, and it requires some careful consideration. We tend to think that building a good track record matters, being reliable and consistent.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah, to us. But Deida argues that women don't necessarily experience relationships that way. They're so tuned into the present moment.
So even if you've been a good partner for years, if you slip up, it can change everything.
He uses that example of a perfect lovemaking session, hours long, ruined by one wrong word at the end. It's like all that good just vanishes.
That's harsh.
But that's Deida's point. It's not about keeping score. It's about the energy you bring to each interaction.
So if you mess up, you got to shift that energy.
Acknowledge it, take responsibility, maybe even surprise her with some affection, something to bring things back to a good place.
Right? It's like hitting the reset button.
In a way. Now, another potentially controversial one. Sexual polarity. Deida seems a bit cautious about this modern push for sameness, even if it's good in other areas.
Yeah, like we might want equality in our careers and daily lives, but in romantic relationships, it's different.
That's Deida's argument. He's concerned that when everything becomes too equal, that spark fades.
Like two magnets with the same charge, they just push each other away.
Exactly. He advocates for embracing those differences,
Yeah.
letting them create that tension that fuels desire.
So sometimes stepping into those more traditional roles, like letting the man lead and the woman receive.
It can be part of it, but it's more about consciously playing with those energies, finding what works for each couple. He also talks about the different temperatures of feminine energy.
Oh, right, that analogy. Like some women have this calming energy while others are more fiery.
Yes. And Deida says that a man needs to be aware of his own needs and seek out a partner whose energy complements his.
It's about finding that resonance.
Makes you think about the women you've been drawn to in your life, the ones who've really energized you.
It does. Now, let's talk about another of Deida's ideas. The dark masculine. That primal energy that exists within every man. The killer instinct, right?
Yeah, but remember, it's not about actual violence. It's a metaphor.
For what?
For a man's capacity to face his fears, to make those tough decisions, to step into the unknown.
And Deida believes that on some level, women are drawn to this.
They see it as strength, as a willingness to protect. And suppressing this energy can lead to a man feeling less vital, less fulfilled.
Like he's not living up to his potential.
Exactly. It's about embracing your full masculinity, the light and the dark.
Makes sense. Now, another thing that resonated with me was Deida's emphasis on physical presence.
Oh yeah, he's big on that. Open posture, deep breathing, direct eye contact.
He even has exercises for it.
To help men release tension, to stand more confidently in the world. It's not about being aggressive, it's about embodiment.
It's like you're taking up space, owning your power.
And he believes this impacts everything. Your career, your relationships, how you move through the world.
So much of it comes back to presence.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, how about that balance between solitude and connection?
That's a constant challenge.
Deida encourages men to carve out space for both, solitude to recharge, connect with your purpose, and then also strong bonds with other men.
The kind of bonds you forge through shared experiences.
Exactly. It's interesting how he contrasts that with how women often recharge, through connection and sharing with other women.
Different ways of restoring our energy.
Now, one last challenging concept from Deida that I wanted to touch on. Being willing to die for your woman?
Okay, let's be clear again. We're not talking about literal death.
Of course not. It's a metaphor, but a really powerful one. Deida's talking about surrendering your ego, being willing to put her needs above your own,
Even when it's hard.
especially when it's hard. It's about recognizing that the relationship is something bigger than both of you.
And that true love requires that level of sacrifice.
That's Deida's message. It can be a difficult concept, but he believes it's at the heart of deep, fulfilling intimacy.
Wow. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of the main points from The Way of the Superior Man. Any final thoughts?
It's important to remember that Deida's work is meant to be a catalyst for growth, not a set of rigid rules.
It's about exploring these ideas, experimenting, seeing what works for you.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. And it takes courage, honesty, a willingness to challenge yourself.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for joining me on this exploration.
It's been my pleasure.
And for you listening, we encourage you to pick up a copy of The Way of the Superior Man, reflect on what resonated with you, and see how you can apply these insights to your own life. Until next time.